many of our regular listeners will know that I took care of my mother when she was in retirement. She became disabled. She had polio as a child, and then compounding effects of the disease over time made her orthopedics really bad. And so about 60, she wasn't really able to walk anymore and became disabled, could no longer work. And so she came to live with me in Minneapolis. This story happened about 6 months after she moved up here. So I was working full time in an office job, and I came home Friday afternoon in the wintertime. And for anyone who lives in a northern climate, you know that you get home, it's been snowing all day, and one of the first things that you need to do is shovel your sidewalk, shovel your driveway. And I had just gotten home and there were some dishes in the sink. So I walk in, I say hello to my mother and started washing the dishes. And I heard her from her bedroom call out to me and say, "Hey, you need to shovel the driveway right away. You know, your tenants complain to me when they come home from work and the driveway's not shoveled." Now, it was a specific tenant. I won't get into my relationship with that tenant, but she was my ex-girlfriend. Why my ex-girlfriend was living in my house is a totally different story. But anyway, this person would complain to my mom behind my back when I didn't shovel the driveway in an expedient manner. And so I'm like, "Yeah, Mom, I know. I'll take care of it. I know she doesn't like that, so I'll take care of it." The next thing I know, my mom is standing in the doorway of the kitchen. So she has gotten out of bed. And the one thing to know is at that point in her life, if she was getting out of bed, it was important to her. It hurt for her to get up and move around. And so she was either going to the bathroom, getting food, or it was something really important. So she's standing at the door behind me, and I'm washing the dishes, and I hear her again say, "Hey, yeah, you really need to go shovel the driveway." And I'm like, "Yeah, Mom, I know. I will get to it." And I continue to wash the dishes. Now she walks into the kitchen, is now standing maybe 4 or 5 feet behind me, and she starts in again about, "I really don't like it when she comes up here and complains about you behind your back and blah, blah, blah." And it just keeps going with it. So finally I turn around, shut off the water, turn around, lean back against the counter, and I look at her and I say, "You know what, Mom? I will get to it when I get to it. And you want to know why? Because this is my house and I pay the bills. That's why." And when I tell this story, I tell people I'd been waiting 30 years to say that to my mom, right? All the times she said that to me as a kid. "You want to know why? Well, it's because I'm the mom and you're the kid." She would always say that to me. So, well, now the roles have changed, right? And I said that to her smug 30-year-old single guy. And I was pretty proud of myself that I pulled that out until my mom turned around, walked back into her room, closed the door, and cried for 2 weeks.
I was just going to ask you, how'd that work out for you?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the moment that I learned the most surprising thing about my mom coming to live with me, which was, and this is what I always told clients, your kids love you. They will take care of you. Yes, you're absolutely right. If you run out of money, you're not going to be sleeping on the streets, right? Like, your kids are going to take care of you, but it's on their terms. You become their dependent. And the challenging part isn't what they have to put up with in order for you to live with them. It's what you have to put up with in order to meld into their life. And, my mom put herself through college, raised 2 kids on her own, got a master's degree and a law degree, became a full professor at the University of South Florida. I mean, really want to talk about pulling yourself up by your bootstrap story. A huge amount of pride. And then all of a sudden it was taken away from her, and she's now just the old lady living in my spare bedroom. And that process of watching that was not only the hardest part for her, it was also the hardest part for me. And a large part of it being hard was the fact that I wasn't prepared for it, and I didn't really know it was coming. And until that conversation happened, I recognized it pretty quickly because
The door slamming.
she didn't actually slam the door. And I didn't actually even realize that she was crying until after I had gotten in from actually going out to shovel the sidewalk. I came in and there were tissues everywhere. But what I did know is that I remembered learning early on in my career that one of the big things people face going into retirement is that loss of purpose, right? Like, I used to be a doctor, I used to be a lawyer, and now I'm just a retired person. And I recognized that, but on top of it was added also that lack of really self-determination, right? Because she wasn't in control of her own life anymore at that point. So we're starting to stray a little bit into the main topic. So I will go ahead and start the episode 30 of the Valuability Podcast. Obviously, caring for retired parents is the title of our episode. The Valuability Podcast is for financial professionals, business owners, and anyone interested in financial planning, business, leadership, and personal development. We believe that financial success comes from building a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will help you get there. My name is Danforth Fleek. I was a financial advisor and product wholesaler for over 20 years. I am joined each week by my co-host, friend, and mentor, Philip Simonson. Philip has been in financial services for over 40 years in a wide range of roles, from financial advisor to sales trainer and senior manager. So, Philip, I'm not the biggest American football fan these days anymore, but I do have to point out that we started out the season in an excellent way as the mighty Packers defeated the purple Vikings.
The Queens. 0-2. I'm now, the difference between a fan and a spectator. Fan, they stay to the end. Spectators, they leave when things get rough. I am now official spectator. I'm not wasting my Sundays. I have not watched it. Didn't watch it at all last weekend, and I'm out in the woods. I'm doing something on a beautiful autumn Sunday afternoon because that horrific winter is coming. No, I'm with you.
I have to say, I over the years had certainly basked in that German phrase "Schadenfreude," the joy in other people's pain. When the Vikings struggle, although my kind of my diminishment and my primary sport, as you know, Philip, is soccer, true football. And as access to watching that has become more prevalent here, I've kind of, I'd say, I have totally lost interest, but my focus on American football has dropped off. But always the one spot where it does pop up is with you and Garrett and Parker, of course, as well. So if you guys are listening out there too, 1-0 against you guys this year. So. You can find the Valuability Podcast at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, wherever you find your podcasts. We should be there. We also have a YouTube channel. Search Value-Ability on YouTube to find us there. You can also find all of our episodes at value-ability.com. Click on the episodes tab, and all of our past episodes are there. So if you're just finding us, check out our past episodes. This is episode 30. So we have a bunch of them out there. Wherever you find us, please like, review, subscribe, and share. Let folks know about us if you like our content. It is very helpful. Lastly, if you would like to connect with us, you can reach out to us via email, info@value-ability.com. Again, that's info@value-ability.com. If you have articles that you would like us to review or questions that you would like us to answer on an upcoming episode, shoot those to us via email. If you would like to connect with us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, we've got it all. Go to value-ability.com and click on the Contact Us tab. All of our social media links are there. So jumping back to our main topic, the first reference point I typically use with this conversation is that it grows out of the retirement income conversation. Typically, when you're working with a client and talking about their level of savings, their level of income, and actually this ties in very well. Next week, we're going to be having a couple of folks on that have a new income planning solution that will be very interesting to hear about. But when you're working with those clients that are what I called undersaved, right? They just haven't quite gotten the level of assets to, how do you phrase the financial freedom? You have a great way of phrasing it, Philip.
Financial independence is when work is optional and retirement is affordable. And I'm going to let you finish and then come back to me because I bring it up. I'm going to give a different position on this one.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of times where this topic kind of pops up naturally is, well, I'll just go live with my kids, right? Or even worse, I'll just go out in the backyard and kill myself. Like that. That's the one where I'm like, really? Like, that's your retirement plan? You run out of money? Like, that one is where I usually I'm really have to stop and like,
this meeting is over. I'm not taking them on as a client.
Exactly.
Come on.
Right. But it's amazing sometimes the level of blindness people have to like what happens at that point. Just a quick anecdote there. I had a client that I met with. This is when I was an annuity wholesaler. So it was a variable annuity with a living income benefit rider. And it was sold exactly, correctly in my estimation and my philosophy, 20 to 30% of their portfolio covering the gap between Social Security and their base income needs. And, about $400,000 or $500,000 portfolio. This client had worked at a paper mill in northern Minnesota. And so I actually met with them very early on in my career. So it would have been like 08, 09. And 4 years later, this advisor was one of my better clients. He calls me up and he says, "Hey, you remember, Joe, the guy you met with a couple years ago?" "Yeah, totally remember him." "Well, the rest of his money is gone and he now wants to tap into the annuity, and I want you to come try and talk him out of it." So I come up and the guy had already blown through the other $300,000 in his retirement account, only had the annuity left. And of course, with those products, if you start taking out more than your guaranteed amount, you destroy the benefit. And there was really no reason ever to have had it. And so I'm trying to talk him out of it, and he's just not having it. And so finally I'm like, "Look, Mr. Advisor, you got to take this home. We're not getting anywhere." And the advisor just looks at him and he's like, "Okay, Joe, well, what are you going to do when this is gone? Are you going to go back to work or are you going to sell your house?" And the client looked at him and said, "What are you talking about?" And the advisor said, "Well, when this money runs out, what are you going to do? Are you going to go back to work or are you going to sell your house?" "Well, I can't sell the house. We just got it done. A lot of the money they had taken out was to put on a deck and redo their kitchen." And, "Well, we just got the house done. I'm not going to sell the house." Like, "Okay, well, then you're going to go back to work." "Well, no, I'm retired. Why would I go back to work?" Like, just zero recognition of like, and this guy was maybe 2 or 3 years away from that, like running out, and he was in his like early 70s at the time. So people just can sometimes have such a limited view of what actually happens at that point. And so often this conversation will come out of that conversation when you're, setting up that retirement plan. Is okay, well, we're kind of in an undersaved situation. We're going to have to take out probably more than is safe. And so that's increasing the likelihood that you may run out of money later in life. What are the options there? And I think having a plan, having that discussion, much like estate planning, this discussion goes much better if you have it earlier. So I'll pause there and my litany of things I want to talk about, and toss it to you, Philip, for your thoughts.
Yeah, I got quite a few. Let's take the first thought. You know, when I also take up this conversation is with my personal experiences when I'm dealing with finding out what the client's key financial interests are or goals are. Second conversation I have with them, and it's about money, and goals require money in order to achieve. And if they pick education first when they're prioritizing their goals, and retirement second, and education being providing for college education, I stop and pause them there, and I give them the analogy. Uh, how many, and I just ask them, have you flown before? Well, I mean, yes. Okay. What does the attendant say before and do before takeoff? They go through all the precautions in case there's an emergency. And one of them is, look, if we take on high turbulence and all of a sudden the oxygen mask come dropping down, whom do they ask you to put on, put it on first? The child next to you, if you happen to have your children there, or yourself.
It's always do you first.
Do yourself first. Exactly, Dan. Same thing here. And I just tell them, look, you need to take care of your retirement first, because what isn't fair and what isn't right is all of a sudden at the expense of you taking care of yourself, and you come knocking on the door of your children when they have children and say, hey, you know what, mom and I, we had a great time, but you know what, we didn't happen to think too much about our retirement in these golden years. And now we're out of money, or we need, we need to come and stay with you. That is not fair. All right. Because you did not put your priorities right. The children will always figure out how to get through the college costs. You can, there's ways, there's loans, you can work, you can go to junior college first. There's many different things. Take care of yourself first. Second piece, is for our advisors out there, and we have many different listeners here, but for advisors, that I would also share with you in taking on clients, one of the first things you got to do is define current reality for them. So as Dan said, financial planning is the way to help define that current reality. And and what I mean by that, the first job of a leader is to find current reality in a non-obscure way. And that is just, graphically pull up I don't care, your calculator, or pull up Money Guide Pro or whatever planning software you're using, or financial, and say, okay, here's where you are. Here's where you want to be. The difference in between is, pain and growth, or pain or growth. And if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to fall off the cliff. And, these are your numbers. So, something's got to happen here. And if they don't act on your advice, well, then you shouldn't take them on as a client, because that is just going to be a problem.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. If we would want all of our clients to be in a position where they would never have to make this choice non-voluntarily. And I say that to people all the time, that look, when my mom came to live with me, in retrospect, for me as just a human being, it turned out to be one of the greatest blessings in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I also, as regular listeners will remember, I went away to high school, so I left home at 13. I didn't have a full, childhood of being with my mom and living with her. And so there were years that we both felt like we missed out on. And so being able to have her, live with me for 15 years and have that connection and all of those memories is something that is terrific. But it wasn't on our terms. I mean, we knew that was very much a likelihood at some point in her life that she was going to need care, and it was almost certain that it was going to be me. Out of the two siblings, I was the one in a better position to take care of her, both financially and just the fact that I didn't have a partner. My brother did, and where my brother lived, my mom didn't want to be, and she didn't mind being in Minneapolis. So, but even knowing that was coming, it still wasn't on our terms. It still was, when it happened, and we had to deal with it. And so there may be, even if you save enough, a time where you have to go live with family. And, but I always say it's so much easier to do it on your terms than it is to do it on the terms of, hey, I'm out of money. I just can't financially deal with it. I can't make it anymore. I don't have enough money to survive on my own. And that kind of leads into the discussion of where this pops up. As I was thinking about this last night, I've thought of this comparison in the past, but it really crystallized that this conversation is very, very similar to the estate conversation, in that if you don't have it before the events transpire, there's just so much that can go wrong. I say, look, family's family, but when the chips are down and money is on the line, it means nothing. Like, I've seen family members do some of the most horrible things to each other over money, and the other things that pop out are these past feelings of unfairness, that well, mom and dad did this for you and they didn't do this for me. And then you also have to take into account the balance of the parent and the child, right? So if in my situation, my mom came to the table with, she had disability insurance. She was getting a full salary still, plus she had Social Security, she had a pension. So financially, she was bringing things to the table. I ended up later on paying for more and more as her disability insurance fell off, and she didn't have much of an estate, so there was nothing there, in my experience, to really, quote unquote, argue over. But if there is, and a child is taking care of the parents and they're having financial expense, it goes one of two ways. Either that child feels like, well, I put out all this time and energy and money, and I deserve more of the estate, or the other kids look at it and say, well, yeah, but your mom added that $10,000 addition to your house, and blah, 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 blah. And all of the things that pop up are just, they're mind-bendingly, I don't want to say inconsequential, but in the grand scheme of things, they are inconsequential. That all of these other past, inadequacies start to pop up. And having this discussion early on and saying, let's talk about this. Then you add on to the fact that, as an example, I was a single guy with no kids. That's kind of the way I would end that story that I started out the podcast with, was like, I was a single guy. Imagine if I were married, it wouldn't be, this is my house and I pay the bills. That's why. It would be, this is her house and she pays the bills and it's her rules.
But also, I like where you're as you said, there's going to be those circumstances where this is going to just naturally occur. Even if you take care of yourself and you're doing the proper
Right.
planning, there's
Exactly.
disabilities, there's health issues, and most people, as we know, Dan, do not plan. It's the old Harvey story, Golub, the head of American Express, first time speaking to the analysts. Who's your number one competitor? He said, Disney World. They said, well, I'm more perplexed now than after asking that question before. He said, do you mind sharing with us why you say Disney World versus Morgan Stanley or UBS or, Merrill Lynch? He said, no, people, they'll spend more time planning their 2-week holiday than their financial future. So yeah, I'm a little bit older than you by a generation, as many of our listeners know. And when I was growing up and I looked down, it was middle income America. My dad never earned more than what, 33,000, 1,500, 1,700 square foot home, four children. That street, you had grandparents living with you. That was the old way. And that way's probably going to be coming back. So what I would also share with the listeners is where you're going, you got to set up boundaries and you got to have these conversations. And if they're also, family members, they'll argue about the littlest things. And you can be sure those who love you know exactly which emotional triggers you can push. So, you're pushing your mom, she's pushing you. That's going to happen. But you want to treat people with dignity, and
Right.
you're great at that. And you and your mom had a terrific relationship. And I'm glad I got to spend time amongst the two of you. But you got to set up the boundary work. And I'll just share this as a tip. My family members, we still get along. We've both, we're orphans now, the four of us. But when we learned this from Lisa's mother, and when had her house, then went to renting, and now then it was assisted living, now in nursing home, etc. She's 96, still has a great spirit and loves to laugh. But she showed us, look. Um, why don't you come over? She got a bunch of dots. So, put items on, things that you might want. Put your dot, your different colored
Hmm.
dot on it. And then what we did, we drew straws or you drew numbers to decide who would go first and then
Yeah.
who would go second, third, or fourth. And the one who happened to draw fourth, then they got to draw fifth, or they got to pick
It's a
fifth. So
keepsake fantasy draft.
yeah. So and it worked marvelously, and there
Yeah.
was no hard feelings. We had fun with it, and
Right.
and no one felt cheated that way.
Right.
And it was just the way it was going to work. And I would highly recommend those are things that you're going to have conversations you're going to have, and it we'll come back to it, but when it's appropriate, and I want to turn it back to you. But you got we have a document called the Five Wishes document that should be part of your boundary work, and that needs to be laid down between you, your parents, and your other siblings, and that deals with 30 seconds. It deals with you know and it gives the parent an opportunity. Look, if I should what I'm looking, when my demise does come, what I want to happen spiritually, your funeral, or if it's hey, if I become incapacitated, look, here's my wishes here. Do not I want to be DNR, do not put me on life support. You need to have that conversation, have it all filled out. Tough stuff, but crucial and critical
It
items
really
when taking
is.
care of the elderly now, and it's going to fall upon a lot of the your generation and the generation younger than you, us us baby boomers. There's many of us who didn't take care of their retirement. So more families are going to take in their grandparents, I suspect.
It's a great point. In our society, that had been more common and now is less common. And it is definitely coming back. And one of the biggest differences with us and other
The granny annex. Europeans, when I lived in England, they got the granny annex. The English loved it. Thought it was a great concept.
the difference, though, a lot of people don't think about with us is geography, right? The
Right.
Europeans don't think about geography the way we do, from the standpoint of like my relatives in Switzerland. Like one of my cousins lives maybe an hour and 15 minutes away, and to them that's the other side of the country.
Or it could even be a new country in Switzerland. You could
Right.
bordering, Italy, France, Germany. Yeah.
Yep. And the other two live 20 minutes away in Bern, the big town that
Hmm.
their small town is outside of. And so as my aunt and uncle age, the kids are right there. And in other countries, they don't have the. I mean, people typically don't move around the way we do for
Oh,
economic
absolutely.
reasons, and just, hey, I'm from South Carolina, I'm gonna move to Washington State. Like that just doesn't happen as much in Europe as it does here in the States.
Yeah.
And nor does it have the impact, because they like, Europeans have a really hard time understanding the scale of our country, because they just don't. Unless they've been here, they really don't understand the distances that we're talking about.
Hmm.
Hey, we can drive for 6 hours and still be in the same state. Like that is just mind bending to them at times. So there are other challenges that you need to be thinking about in terms of geography, and that leads also into the other big challenge that I think advisors can be helpful with clients around, and that is the question that always, every time someone found out, I would say every time, but I would say 80% of the time, when someone found out that I cared for my mother, one of the first questions they would ask is, "Oh, don't you have siblings?" And I would say, "Yeah, I have a brother." "Oh, well, don't they help?" And it totally misses the concept of what I opened up the podcast with, of this. There's this wall that you have to get over when the parent moves in with you, that you know my mom really for a long time felt like she was ruining my life by having moved in with me. And once we got to an equilibrium and she was happy and we had figured out how to coexist, the worst thing that could possibly have happened would have been, "Oh, hey, my 5 years is up, shipping you off to my brother Don." Like, just it just doesn't work that way. You don't pass your parent around like a pet. Like, this is a human, and there are a lot of issues that you have to handle. And once they get comfortable, you don't want to upset that equilibrium and have them have to go through that process again. And so it does almost always come down to one child being the primary caregiver. And before I took care of my mom, I didn't really understand why, and now I do. And so being able to help guide clients through that process and getting them to understand that, like, this isn't going to visit the grandkids for a couple weeks. Like, this is the rest of your life we're talking about. And so understanding that. And the last point that I wanted to make is, like a lot of things in our business, you use the phrase a social worker by heart and a capitalist by brain. This is definitely a social worker side of things, but there is also a huge upside as an advisor to your business in going through this, and also the estate process, which is building the relationships with the kids. They are either current prospects then, or when your clients die, they are going to get the money that you are managing. And so being able to build those relationships can be crucial to helping continue your business. And in addition to just being the right and good thing to do, it also is one of these cases where it does make good business sense to have this conversation. So for the most part, wraps up most of the things that I have to say. Did you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, it's an emotional subject, and it's a tough one. And I think, like I said, we're going to see more and more of these scenarios unfolding. And when they do, I would just again reemphasize, look, you gotta sit down and have these hard conversations, this boundary work ahead of time. And once you and that's with your not just with the parents and but it's got to be with your siblings, and you're going to have conversations. Yeah, I'm going to primary caretaker, but you know what? We're going to need holiday time, and we need you then to come here. You know, maybe initially they can fly and come and visit you, or we can drive. Drive them there, but at some point, that's going to become an issue. So, going to
That's a
need you to
great
come
point.
here. You're going to need help financially on this, and emotionally and support. Um, and here, and I think and if you happen to be the primary caretaker, okay, you've taken personal responsibility. Now you own it. It's your decisions. What I've seen happen is all of a sudden they feel cheated. I'm the one, I play the martyr, everything falls on my shoulders, and martyrs do become saints, but it's not till after you die. So, here's the other thing,
Absolutely.
right? So the other thing I've learned here too, and then you've got resentment, which is not good to your siblings, and you've got to learn how to forgive. And forgiveness, I'll just remind our listeners, forgiveness is giving up hoping the past would have been different, and that's when you can finally let go. If you happen to be in this scenario now, for some of you, some of your listeners, or etc., just remember, I'm going to repeat it. Forgiveness is giving up the past, hoping it would have been different.
Definitely.
So that's my thoughts. Great topic, Dan.
Yeah, I'll just wrap up with one last thought that occurred to me, which is also the fact that these things also have ripple effects, or can have ripple effects. And to put it in context of my personal story, when my mom came to live with me, my grandmother was still alive, and she was helping support my grandmother. And then when my mother's finances diminished, it actually ended up that I assumed that responsibility. And then there was some disagreement within my mother and her siblings about care for my grandmother, and who was paying more, and who was providing the care, and who was getting what. And at a certain point, I'm not proud to say it, I lost my temper and became quite crappy with some of my mother's siblings about that, from the standpoint that my mom was no longer the one making the financial contributions, I was. And so it can also have ripple effects into other levels and generations as well. So yeah, I think awesome topic. Bottom line and of takeaway is, along with the estate conversation, it's something you need to have a plan for discussing with your clients. Finding the resources that you find available. I forgot about the wishes piece. We will
Five
put
wishes,
that
yes.
on our website
Mhm.
for our listeners. So go to value-ability.com, click on the content tab, and scroll down to episode 30, and we will have a link for that. So we will transition into our article review for the week. And actually, this week we're going to be talking about an infographic that I found on Twitter. And the first thing I want to make perfectly clear, this is not a paid endorsement. This company is not somebody that sponsors the podcast, and they're not paying us to do this. Just something I found that I thought was interesting. And it was from a company called AdvisorStream. And they provide communications, online digital communication content for financial advisors. Obviously, then they have an interest in understanding how financial advisors are viewing their clients and communication with their clients. And so they did a survey of over 1,000 financial advisors in the United States and Canada, and they added then info from their own experience in their business model. And I'll just cover some of the facts that are on this infographic. Again, I will post this. I'll post a link to it on our Twitter account, as well as putting it up on our website, value-ability.com. Click on the content tab, and we'll have a link under the article links section to the infographic. So they kind of break this down and call it a tale of two financial advisors, communication during crisis. Of course, for our regular listeners, you'll know that we kicked off the podcast with Chosen or Frozen, our discussion of this very topic. So go back to episode 1 and listen to that if you have interest. But some of these are really interesting statistics. So 20% additional open rate of digital communications over the industry average for what they call the digitally enabled advisor. So the advisor who is consistently using digital communications. 52% of advisors are concerned about losing clients during the pandemic. 37% are very concerned about losing clients due to lack of regular communication. Obviously, with limitations on being able to see people face to face, advisors are feeling like, hey, I need to figure out other ways to communicate with clients. And then lastly, 60% of people are struggling with finding content to pass on to their clients. Nearly 40% of growth in leads by advisors are from those who embrace digital tools. And, that's actually it didn't occur to me when we started talking. I originally thought of talking about this topic, but this has been one of our thoughts for this podcast, is that advisors could use our podcast as a form of communication with clients. You can pass on our podcast to clients if there are topics that we're talking about that you think are relevant to them. And I just thought it was really, really relevant to, everything that we've been talking about, and especially in the face of the current health situation, people not being able to do face-to-face meetings, that staying connected digitally and figuring out how to become more digital is going to be crucial for advisors moving forward. And some of these stats I thought were just really eye-opening from that standpoint.
I agree, Dan. And my 2 cents on this are, I loved, and I'm not surprised, the open rates are 20% higher than industry averages, and the click-throughs, 171% higher than industry averages. So that tells me people were concerned, people were looking for information on what they should be doing. And I would encourage people, shameless plug. I know, I won't name names, but you and I are working with a couple of advisors. One is just manages just a little over 100 million. The other one is 50 some million. They didn't lose any clients during this process. We provided them lots of different communications, from emails to telephone, approaches and how to talk to their clients. But I think the most important thing here is to ask that question. Look, Mr. With a new prospect that you're thinking about taking on as a client, and then going back to existing clients now that this is over. Let's deal with the first prospect, and it's a question that I would ask, and it's about LensCrafter, in and out in about an hour. That's the initial, my initial interview, and I'm going to determine whether I can work with them and want to work with them and have them as a client. And then, more importantly, they'll determine whether or not they think there's enough perceived value to enter into a long-term planning relationship with me. But I will manage expectations with this question. If we're sitting down 3 years from today and you said we've had a successful relationship, what must happen in order for that to occur? That will naturally, they're going to, it makes them think. It's the what question, makes them go internal. And the worst thing that can happen, well, what do you mean by that? Well, okay, let me pick it up. Let's start with communication. What's the best mode of communication to interact with you? Is it text? If your BD allows that. Is it Twitter? Is it email? Is it your phone? Phone is used to be always one of the first, or but now it might not be. And when's the best time? When's the best time to get a hold of you? And manage expectations. Crisis will happen. I will get a hold of you, but when the crisis is going on, you just need to know, it might be within 48 hours, but boy, if you need me sooner, you call me and reach out to me. But I would help start, I would manage those expectations. And we have a tool. It's your client service with purpose. It's a manual. It's all about processes, and you should be learning. And if I was an advisor today, I would be asking my clients during the reviews I'm holding now, particularly in the fourth quarter, uh, look, how did I do? Scale of 1 to 10. 1 being not, you're not very satisfied. 10, you're extremely satisfied. And how I communicated to you during this last crisis. And, find out. Start with that open-ended. And then what are 1 or 2 things you want me to continue doing? What are 1 or 2 things you wish I would start doing the next time around? I'd get that feedback. It's that defining current reality, right? And we said the truth will set you free, but first it'll make you miserable. Get ready. You might not have done a good job.
Yeah, I think some of these statistics really highlight. I mean, we are a belly to belly business, at its core. I spent a majority of my career on the wholesale side, and you can be really efficient with digital communications, but in the end, there's nothing that replaces the belly to belly, and that's not going to change. That is going to remain the primary way of having a relationship. And I've seen some folks, as I've built our Twitter account, that are 100% virtual advisors and have clients all over. And earlier in my career, actually, it was a connection that you made for me. One of your other mentees hired me to help build out a business that was trying to develop an online, advice business. And it's really challenging to have that entire financial planning process go on virtually. It's much easier to do it in person for a whole host of reasons. But what this info tells me, and this survey tells me, is that many advisors rely on that too much, and they don't have a set of processes just for regular communication that they feel comfortable with, under normal circumstances. And so under extreme circumstances, they're really starting to feel that lack. So definitely I second, the like all processes. The process we have isn't rocket science. It's very simple, simple in concept. The challenge is always execution. And I think that's where we really set ourselves apart, is we focus on helping advisors with the actual execution part of it. There are plenty of people out there to tell you, hey, this is your problem. And that was always my problem with therapy when I was a kid. They would send me like, why are you angry? You're angry all the time. Yeah, I know that's my problem. I know I'm angry all the time. Give me some tools to fix it. That's what we do. We have tools to fix it. So we will wrap that up with that shameless plug.
Oh, Dan, do you that recalls our definition of a consultant. They know 50 ways to make love, but don't have a lover.
Right.
We
the Kama Sutra.
So, laughter is a good thing, and I hope that puts some smiles on some of your faces. Till next time.
Awesome. So if you have topics or questions that you would like us to cover in an upcoming episode, reach out to us via email, info@value-ability.com. Again, that's info@value-ability.com. Or you can connect with us on social media. We have Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook accounts. Search value-ability.com under the Contact Us tab, and all of our social media links are listed there. Wherever you find us, please, the mantra of podcasters each and every time, like, review, subscribe, and share. It really does help us out. Next week, as I mentioned, episode 31, we are going to be having on two of the top executives from Income Lab. You can find them at incomelaboratory.com. They are a financial planning tool. One of the questions I have for them is that, do they consider themselves a software? Definitely, it's a financial software service / tool that focuses in on an innovative way to structure income. And as that's where I spent a majority of my career, I'm really interested to see some of the innovations that they have come up with. So we are very excited to have them on next week. Check back for that. If you've had experience caring for a parent or had clients who have, what are some of the key learnings you have gathered from that process in either in your personal life or in your financial advice practice? I'd love to hear some of our listeners' experiences in that realm. And then on the side of our article for the week, what changes have you made in your client communications during the pandemic, and do you see those becoming permanent after the pandemic is over? So reach out to us, let us know your thoughts on our main topic and our article for the week. As always, thank you for listening. Be sure to join us next week. And remember that financial success comes from building a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will help you get there. This is a podcast collaboration, not a peer-reviewed journal or a sponsored publication. We make no representations as to accuracy, completeness, correctness, suitability, or validity of any information in this podcast, and will not be liable for any errors, omissions, or delays in this information, or any losses, injuries, or damages arising from its display or use. All information is provided on an as-is basis. It is the listener's responsibility to verify their own facts. You should be aware of the real risk of loss in following any strategy or investment discussed on this podcast. Strategies or investments discussed may fluctuate in price or value. Investors may get back less than invested. Investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you. This material does not take into account your particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs, and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. You must make an independent decision regarding investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast. Before acting on information on this podcast, you should consider whether it is suitable for your particular circumstances and strongly consider seeking advice from your own financial or investment advisor. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. Assumptions are not reflective of the position of any entity other than the authors, and since we are critically thinking human beings, these views are always subject to change, revision, and rethinking at any time. Please do not hold us to them in perpetuity.